The Crime of the Cordelier by Marguerite de Navarre, born 1492, died 1549. There was in the dominions of the Emperor Maximilian of Austria a monastery of Cordelier, held in high esteem, near which was the house of a gentleman. There was in this monastery a tall, handsome young Cordelier, whom the gentleman had taken for his confessor, and who was an absolute in the house as the master himself. The Cordelier, struck by the exceeding beauty and propriety of the gentleman's wife, became so enamoured of her that he could neither eat nor drink, and lost all natural reason. Resolved to execute his design, he went all alone one day to the gentleman's house. Finding no one at home, the monk asked the lady whether the husband was gone. She replied that he was gone to one of his estates, where he was to remain for 2 or 3 days, but that if he wanted him she would send an express to bring him back. The Cordelier told her that it was not necessary, and began to go to and fro about the house, as if he had some affair of consequence in his head. As soon as the monk had left the lady's room, she said to one of her women, there were but 2 of them, "Run after the father, and learn what he wants, for I know by his looks that he is not pleased." The girl, finding him in the courtyard, asked him if he wanted anything. He said he did, and drawing her into the corner, he plunged into her bosom a poniard he carried in his sleeve. He had hardly done the deed when one of the gentleman's men, who had gone to receive the rent for a farm, entered the yard on horseback. As soon as he had dismounted, he saluted the Cordelier, who embraced him and buried the poniard in his back, after which he closed the gates of the chateau. The lady, seeing that her servant did not return, and surprised at her remaining so long with the Cordelier, said to the other woman, "Go, and see why your companion does not come back." The servant went, and no sooner came in sight of the Cordelier than he called her aside, and served her as he had done the other. Knowing that he was then alone in the house, he went to the lady, and told her that he had long loved her, and that it was time she should obey him. She, who could never have suspected him of anything of the kind, replied, "I believe, father, that if I were so unhappily inclined, you would be the first to condemn me and cast a stone at me." "Come out into the yard," said the monk, "and you will see what I have done." The poor woman did so, and seeing her 2 women and her man lying dead on the ground, was so horrified that she remained motionless and speechless as a statue. The villain, who did not want to possess her for an hour only, did not think fit to offer her violence then, and said to her, "Have no fear, mademoiselle. You are in the hands of that man in all the world who loves you the most." So saying, he took off his habit, beneath which he had a smaller one, which he presented to the demoiselle, threatening, if she did not put it on, that he would treat her as he had done the others. The demoiselle, more dead than alive, made a show of obeying him, as well as to save her life as to gain time, in the hope that her husband would return. She took off her headdress, by the Cordelier's order, as slowly as she could, and when she had done so the monk, without regard to the beauty of her hair, cut it off in haste, made her strip to her shift, and put on the small habit, and then, resuming his own, he set off with all the speed he could, and with the little Cordelier, whom he had so long coveted, at his side. But God, who has pity on the wronged innocent, was touched by the tears of this poor lady, and so ordered things that her husband, having dispatched his business sooner than expected, took that very road to return home by which the Cordelier was carrying off his wife. The monk, descrying the husband from a distance, said to the lady, "Here comes your husband. I know that if you look at him, he will try to get you out of my hands, so walk before me, and do not turn your head in his direction. For if you make him the least sign, I shall have plunged my poniard into your breast sooner than he shall have delivered you." Presently the gentleman came up and asked him from whence he came. "From your house, monsieur. I left mademoiselle quite well, and she is expecting you." The gentleman rode on without perceiving his wife, But the valet who accompanied him, and always had been in the habit of conversing with the Cordelier's companion, named Friar John, called to his mistress, thinking that she was that person. The poor woman, who durst not turn her head towards her husband, made no reply to the valet, and the latter crossed the road that he might see the face of this pretended brother John. The poor lady, without saying anything, made a sign to him with her eyes, which were full of tears. The valet then rode up to his master and said, "In conscience, monsieur, Friar John is very like mademoiselle, your wife. I had a good look at him as I crossed the road. It is certainly not the usual Friar John. At least I can tell you that if it is, he weeps abundantly, and that he gave me a very sorrowful glance of his eye." The gentleman told him he was dreaming, and made light of what he said. The valet, however, still persisted in it that there was something wrong, asked leave to ride back and see to it, and begged his master to wait for him. The gentleman let him go, and waited to see what would be the upshot. But the Cordelier, hearing the valet coming after him with shouts to Friar John, and making no doubt that the lady had been recognized, turned upon the valet with a great iron-bound staff, gave him such a blow upon the side that he knocked him off his horse, and springing instantly upon him with a poniard, speedily dispatched him. The gentleman, who from a distance had seen his valet fall, and supposed that this had happened by some accident, spurred towards him at once to help. As soon as he was within reach, the Cordelier struck him a blow of the same staff with which he had struck the valet, unhorsed, and fell upon him. But the gentleman, being very strong, threw his arms around the Cordelier, and hugged him so roughly that he not only prevented him from doing any more mischief, but made him drop the poniard. The wife caught it up at once and gave it to her husband. At the same time she seized him by his hood and held him with all her might, whilst her husband stabbed him several times with the poniard. The Cordelier, being unable to do anything else, begged for quarter and confessed the crime he had committed. The gentleman granted him his life, and begged his wife to go for his people in a cart to carry the prisoner away, which she did, throwing off her Cordelier's habit and hurrying home in her shift and her cropped hair. The gentleman's retainers all hastened to help him to bring home the wolf he had captured, and the culprit was afterwards sent by the gentleman of Flanders to be tried by the Emperor's officers. He not only confessed the crime for which he was tried, but also avowed a fact which afterwards verified on the spot by special commissioners sent for that purpose, which was that several other ladies had been taken to that convent in the same manner as this Cordelier had attempted to carry off the lady whom we are speaking, and if he did not succeed, this was owing to nothing else than the goodness of God, who always takes upon him the defence of those who trust in him. The girls and other stolen spoil found in the monastery were removed, and then the monks were burned with the monastery, in perpetual memorial of a crime so horrible. We see from this fact there is nothing more cruel than love, when its principle is vice, and there is nothing more human or more laudable when it dwells in a virtuous heart.